Good morning, Exiles. We are live from the Grinding Gear Games studios here in New Zealand. All three of us in person today for the first time ever for a very exciting and massive Q&A after some real whiplash from some huge announcements there. It just kept going. Like, you guys just kind of got in a room together and set up the whiteboard and put everything on there, huh?
End of the day, really, it's we have this much time, we have this many people who can do what we do, and we just keep going till the end. Like, it doesn't stop here. Like, we've still got one more week, right? Like, there are still changes that can be made, so we're going to keep making them. So,
somos los que hacemos esto, estamos esforzando muchísimo, todavía que una semana, todavía hay cambios que queremos hacer y pues los pongamos.
I think it's that big, and I was like, mate, that was crazy. It just kept going.
Yeah, I mean, I guess from my perspective, I kind of look at this and I'm like, okay, when I compare it to the amount of stuff that's being created for PoE2, it seems small, but yeah, when you actually think about it, it's like, yeah, it's pretty nuts.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, making a whole new game there, but we are only talking about Path of Exile 1 today, and you gave it plenty of space to shine. And we've got returning leagues, we've got a whole new league with a lot going on, and some very experimental content as well.
Solamente de Path of Exile 1 hoy.
With all of that, you did tease us once again with the concept and potential of a boat league, and yet you sailed away and left us stranded on the dock once more.
Una vez más nos mostraron algo que pareció una liga de botes, pero
it's very much not intentional.
Pero simplemente no lo hicieron.
And honestly, I honestly reckon if someone actually got a boat league, they wouldn't end up actually liking it. But
dice que cree que si tuviésemos una liga de botes no le gustaría.
So maybe one day we'll get there. But until then, you're just going to have, there'll be boats, but you won't be on the boats.
Dice que van a haber botes, pero no vas a estar en el bote.
One day. We'll see.
All right. We'll have to keep dangling that just out of reach for us. So, does this feel like to you guys? And I've seen this theory floated around a lot, of a bit of a send-off league for Path of Exile 1, in a sense that we've got the Path of Exile 2 beta just around the corner now.
I guess I don't really see it that way
because, you know, we intend to keep on making PoE 1 leagues. You know, we're gonna like, you know, it really is just, you know, the standard lead cycle. You know, it is hard as a studio making two things at the same time, for sure. But you know, that's something we just have to sort of get used to. And yeah, we certainly wouldn't want people to think, oh yeah, this is like the last PoE 1 league or something like that, right? It's definitely not the case. You know, like we're going to be continuing to make.
Vamos a seguir haciendo cosas en Path of Exile 1. No quiero que la gente piense que esta es la última liga de Path of Exile 1.
Of this size in the future as well.
Y esto es nada para tener una idea del tamaño y lo que viene en el futuro también.
Adds gold, and I think we should touch on that and the whole currency exchange thing first.
Okay. Añadieron oro y vamos a hablar de todo el tema de intercambio de currency.
Features, its progression with the workers and upgrading buildings and things like that. But you're also experimenting with some core game features like respecs and a trading fee for the new currency exchange. Huge announcement there. So those that have been following Path of Exile 2 will be familiar with the concept of gold and why that's a thing that you might add to the game now after it's not had gold for so long. But could you explain what is the idea behind gold?
I mean, gold is something that PoE 1 obviously never had. I think it's something that, in retrospect, I think that didn't help the game. The important thing with gold is that it's not used as a trading currency. Like, gold needs to be something that is only like it's bound to the individual character, and that means what it effectively is a measure of how much actual play that you've done, right? Since you can't trade.
La idea del oro es que no sea algo para intercambiar, sino algo que represente el tiempo que tú le has puesto a tu cuenta, que es algo que es unido a tu personaje.
With an automated system like that, because you know, in order to be able to you can't just sit there flipping all day. You actually have to be able to go and play the game as well.
No puedes simplemente flipear todo el día. Tienes que jugar el juego.
Inflation that you can get with other automated, you know, auction house type systems that you see in other action RPGs, or at least that's the theory. But the thing is that we have to test this stuff, and this is the reason why we're really keen to do it as a league mechanic to start with, to sort of see, like, you know, is it going to work? Is the economy going to go weird? You know, what's going to happen? That way we can kind of dip our toe in, see what happens. You know, test this, because
esta es nuestra forma de testear qué va a pasar.
You really cannot test it, you know, like in the office, right? Like it is simply we don't have thousands and thousands of people that you would need.
Dice que no hay forma de testear esto, así que simplemente lo vamos a hacer a ver qué pasa.
On some level, you know,
el tema del tradeo.
Our community to see what happens with the economy to be able to test something like that, and that's just, you know, one of the few areas where that's like that. Yeah, what we're hoping is that everything just goes fine. It's just way better. We can then immediately.
Estamos esperando que simplemente sea algo mejor y que vaya bien.
As soon as we've done with that, ideally without too many tweaks.
Ojalá que no haya que hacer muchos cambios. cambios.
That'll be good, but yeah, we really have to see by putting it in a league first.
Pero tenemos que verlo poniendo una liga primero para ver qué onda.
The idea is that it allows you to effectively be converting this idea of friction in the user experience of like physically trading into actual gameplay.
Right,
the stuff we like doing.
For sure.
O sea, la idea de poner fricción en gameplay de verdad es bueno porque es lo que estamos jugando.
It would be also really nice to be able to see how it works before we ship PoE2 as well.
También es una buena idea ver cómo funciona antes de que lancemos Path of Exile 2.
We may be able to go further than this. The intention is to go further, and
la idea es ir mucho más lejos.
The first part, but yeah, we'll see how it goes. I don't know if you know.
There is also one thing about this, and just because it maybe wasn't clear, is that despite being in the league, gold is just dropping as items from killing everything in the game.
Aunque el oro esté en la liga, va a caer en todas partes del oro.
You don't actually need to engage with the league to use the gambling, use the respecking, or use the currency
no tienes que interactuar con el liga para usar el respec, el gamba y todo el trading de currency. No hace falta.
If you don't like the league's mechanics,
si no te gusta el liga la mecánica,
like those are gated behind that as well. I just wanted to
puedes
clarify
hacerlo.
That just in case
puedes
interactuar
con esto sin tener que estar en la liga.
Faustus into your hideout and then just use them for that, and and that can be the only thing you do if you want.
So all that currency exchange, the item gambling and stuff is all like fully accessible, even if you basically don't do any of the other stuff.
For sure,
for sure.
Todo está accesible si no haces más nada de eso.
If it is successful, it can port into the core game very
Aprovecho también de decir, gente, todos los que estén viendo en Twitch, sin exclamación verde, si pueden venir a verme también en Kick o darle follow en Kick. No hay publicidades. Me ayudaría muchísimo para poder llegar a la meta de que me den el incentivo y me den el verificado. Se los agradecería del fondo del alma. Si lo hacen, es totalmente gratis. Me ayudaría un montón, gente.
Certainly our intention is just that we want to be able to still have an out if things go horribly wrong, or if we feel like we need to change some stuff. So yeah, like it is certainly our intention to keep it in if we can.
Dice de que la idea es quedarnos con esto si podemos, pero si algo sale horriblemente mal, podemos cambiarlo antes de que salga Path of Exile 2.
No one's going to let us remove it, right? So like, let's be realistic here.
It would have to go horrifically wrong for everyone to be like, okay, you were right, don't do this.
Tiene que salir horríficamente mal para que la gente diga, tienes razón, esto era una mala idea. Pero yo no creo, de verdad, todo se ve muy bueno.
Pretty powerful from what I saw. Like the items it was producing were like those really well rolled rares. What's the idea behind the gold-based gambles? Why is that a part of it?
Ultimately, it's a sink. You don't want gold to just be accumulated forever.
¿Cuál es la idea de las gambas con el oro?
Specific base types. And that's ultimately the luxury. So obviously when you're going through the campaign and you're looking for specific targeted gear upgrades, very, very useful for that. And
principalmente es un escurridero de oro. Siempre no quieres que el oro se acumule para siempre. Y es una forma de poder comprar algo específico que necesites.
It upgrades the modifier tier rating, which was a term some people might not know, but it was used in Necropolis League, which effectively cuts off the bottom X tiers that can generate. So the items by endgame will be generating with a minimum tier higher than something, and thus they are pretty powerful
Necropolis
items. It's worth mentioning that, like,
lo del gambleo, solo que sin interactuar con Necropolis. Porque a medida que subes el nivel que estás en el endgame, te va a dar mejores items cortando los tiers inferiores de los items.
And that extends to things like, adding more base types higher up and so on to make it so that there's like that they can compete with uniques more, the higher tier life mods, all of this sort of stuff, and the gambling and the ability to get res this way as well is like once again another part of this. So we really want to try and make it so that, and the reason why that's important is because if like Mark said in the video with the item quants problem as well, that was one of the other things that sort of meant that you had to be tied to specific uniques, like for sure. And so yeah, we just wanted to remove more of the barriers that allow people to just be able to use rares, and then that opens up for more different build types. Like if less uniques become mandatory. That's as I said, it's just another one of those things that kind of affects that.
So with that being
una de las razones por la que quitamos el quantity de los items es porque así tú puedes jugar con ítems raros con rarity en lugar de estar obligado a jugar con únicos.
Very fast and asynchronous currency exchange system. Like obviously gold is your ability to control how much of that's happening in terms of volume. How liquid do you want any currency orb drop to be? So
for currency in particular, we're fine with like a very high amount of liquidity. Later on, we've talked about how in PoE2 we're going to be doing asynchronous trade for items as well. For that, we need to have a bit less liquidity, and the reason why is because currency can sync itself. Like there is its own currency sync, so effectively that means that we don't have to like worry too much about fast trade there. Like the relative value should establish, and everything should be okay. And it shouldn't matter too much about that being highly liquid. That said, there is still
la liquidez de la currency va a ser extremadamente alta. O sea, tú vas a poder tradear sin prácticamente ninguna barrera la currency. En Path of Exile 2 con el tema de los items va a ser distinto porque no, los items no se destruyen, la currency sí, porque tú la usas y desaparece.
Playing regularly, that you can get all the currency you want from the trade market and you don't feel restricted by the gold price. Like it's not intended to be something that a normal player would run into, assuming that they're just doing normal things with currency.
Of course, it is still meant to have high friction early game.
Yeah, because you
don't want to demean the leveling experience and the new player experience where they think the right answer is to go and just trade all of the stuff away. You want it to be that you're more finding items there and getting things organically, and only later in the game does it become.
So the gold prices late in the game are like not a roadblock at all. The gold prices early in the game are a roadblock. So that's kind of preventing that early game kind of issue.
Yeah, because you want an alch when you're leveling your first character.
You do
to feel like an alch.
Yeah, exactly.
Not to be like,
you don't
this
want
should
to
be chaos.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay. But that honestly
al
sounds
inicio
like a
del juego,
relief that you're not
tradear
worried
currency
about that sort of
va a
thing
ser
too much,
como un poquito más pesado, va a ser un poquito más caro, pero eso es porque tiene que ver con un progreso. No tiene que sentirte como que tú estás entrando a nivel 1, voy a tradearte una vez, que eso es lo importante. La idea es que tú sigas progresando y tal, y cuando llegas al endgame no va a haber ningún tipo de fricción porque va a ser simplemente muy barato para ti tradear absolutamente todo lo que quieras tradear.
Currency that syncs itself and stuff for so long, and now
tiene
finally blending that with gold and this system. Huge.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's also just a mental block as well, right? Because it's like, how can you add gold to PoE? It's like, it's just one of those. It's one of those things. So
this was one of the key components that was part of like designing the league. It was largely like how we started from that point. Because again, when you ask most people in the office, most players in the office and outside the office, what is the like number one problem with Path of Exile? What experience gives them the most negative reaction?
For sure.
It's often trade.
¿Qué es la cosa más
negativa?
And siempre es el trade.
I can't remember if it was last league or the league before. And I was trying to buy... What was I trying to buy on the currency? It was like one of the catalysts. I was like,
comprar uno de los
catalyst up my rings and ammo.
Oh, man.
And you get 100 people on the trade website.
Yep.
I just went spam. I got 100 people. And guess how many replied? Zero. 0 people replied to me. And I know you to scroll down because all the top people are just bad actors.
A 100 personas,
and then it's like,
ninguno respondió para venderle catalyst.
Okay, genuinely no one replied. And then like so I was just like on Discord, I was like, yo, I need some help buying these things. Can everyone just start messaging everyone trying to get these catalysts for me, please? And so yes, it is actually one of, or was hopefully to be no longer soon, the most frustrating experience you can have as a player in games.
Para que se den cuenta de lo que nosotros nos sucede, men.
So when we're designing the league, we're like, okay, if this is the number one problem, how are we not taking some sort of stride to solve it? And so that's kind of where, well, it almost acted as the basis of how can we build something around that, because then it's gold, and then it's like, what can you do with gold? And then we just extrapolated from there into all kinds of things. So yeah, I like that a lot of what we're developing now is coming from a how can we solve actual problems first, as opposed to just, well, as opposed to entirely how can we add cool content. So how can we do both these things at the same time? And I feel like a lot of what's going on in this patch is with that philosophy, as opposed to just here's cool stuff. It's solving problems and adding cool stuff at the same time.
I love this trend of you just doing the thing we do and being like, this is awful, just like you said.
Actually awful. I tried to, in that live stream, I tried to voice my disgust when I talked about price fixes and people who don't reply. But like, if you had got my actual emotional reaction, I would have probably been screaming a little bit and raging, like, had a little bit more.
Dice que lo que queremos hacer con esta liga es traer algo cool, pero también resolver problemas. Y si podemos resolver problemas haciendo algo cool, sería lo ideal.
It's huge, and it really pairs in with like the Scarab changes and stuff recently as well. So we'll talk more about that later. But the currency exchange includes fragments, scarabs, anything that's homogenized.
Exactly, that's the word. So yeah, so obviously it can't work with things like maps and so on, because they don't, they're not all identical. It's just anything that where they're exactly the same. No one item can be distinguished from another.
It has to be able to stack, is ultimately the goal, So yes, use the existing trade system for the things that can't. So that's like beasts can't be, maps can't be, incubators can't be because they have a level. You know, things like that. They can't because they cannot guaranteed stack on a single thing. And it's not like you don't want to have a tab of incubators where it's got every incubator level 1, every incubator level 2, every incubator level 3, you know, in this giant mega eternal list. So things like that you'll be trading using the existing way, and all stackables you'll trade hopefully using the new way.
All right. Puedes usar la versión vieja para tradear. Pero
anything that is stackable.
La versión nueva va a funcionar para todo lo que sea stackeable. No va a funcionar para cosas que no sean stackeables. Por ejemplo, incubadores no se pueden tradear con la cosa nueva porque tienen niveles. Entonces no podemos tener una tab infinita con todos los tipos de incubadores que hay. It's fine. Eso es lo que hemos estado diciendo. It's good enough, man.
You can technically trade any item for any other item, you know, because that's how PoE works.
No es tan difícil intercambiar items. El problema es intercambiar las cosas que son stackeables y quieres consumir rápido.
That like people are trading this with. So effectively, unless you're the first person ever to trade something, then it's going to say like, you know, here's the most popular several things that, you know, people trade for the saw, trade for the sin. It also shows you like, you know, the market price, obviously, for, you know, what's been going on, as well as okay, so we're getting into stock market terms here. The first five price levels in the order book. So that's to say you can see like what the how many things are available at a few different price levels, and that will allow you to you know, to do your trade. So I suppose some people will be learning more about the stock market.
En la cosa de trade, te van a dar como tips para tradear.
I guess we'll have,
o sea, te van a decir como que esto es lo que está valorando más, esto se vende por esto, ese tipo de cosas. Se están haciendo como básicamente un Wall Street, pero dentro de PoE.
You know who you're trading with, and like it will be instant if there's like liquidity in the market, but it is coming from someone else's actual stash.
Yeah, it's a physical trade still.
Yeah, so you know,
y exacto, porque todas las personas que están haciendo prefixings, si tú pones un divine a 10 caos, te lo van a comprar así, adiós divine. Pues ya no puedes decidir sin no tradearle.
No, it's not that. You're actually buying off someone else. So any trade you do where you've got like, you know, I'm buying this, I'm selling this, someone else has entered a trade on the other end of I'm selling this, I'm buying that. So yeah,
and the prices are all set by players.
Exactly.
Todos los precios están puestos por los jugadores.
There's a few other things I'll just mention as well that are adjacent, or you know, got implemented as a result. So like when you're adding them, it will pull from your stashes. It won't, you don't have to move everything to your inventory first and then do it. So you can,
cuando quieras tradear por esa mecánica, lo saca de tu stash.
Trade away 5,000 chaos or some
no
number
tienes
of
que sacarle y llevarla al sitio.
As long as it is in their stash, you can
Excelente.
do it. You can do up to 65,000 of a given currency in a single exchange.
Puedes tener hasta 65,000.
What else? You can. There are shortcut binds for
65,000 me parece.
All of them to your inventory.
O 6,500.
So you don't have to, like, control click spam 1,000 times. It is, I believe, control right click
will
move all of them to your inventory.
65,000.
And also as a bonus, we have implemented that to and from the stash with all stackables as well.
De una sola currency. Si tienes mucho de esa, hasta 65,000 de una sola currency puedes sacar.
And vice versa.
Gracias.
My 35-year-old hands are falling apart. Thank you.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
Best change. Very good.
Y no tienes que cliquearla. O sea, dices, quiero traer estas 5,000 de tal cosa, se va a traer automáticamente.
Being able to do other things that aren't homogeneous, so maps and gear and things like that.
Well, that's certainly the plan for PoE 2, and it would be nice to be able to do that in PoE 1 as well. We just have to work out how it can work exactly. So, well, I believe that we will get there, and that's certainly our intention. So, you know, we'll see how it goes. But yeah, that's the intention. Like this part, I think though is like
quieren también hacerlo con los items.
A large amount of the problem, because I think this is the currency is what you're doing all the time.
Pero
you know,
quieren como hacerlo por partes, no quieren tirar todo. Quieren agarrar primero resolver el problema de la currency, que es lo que constantemente necesitas, constantemente quieres tradear. Es lo que hay más volumen, y después ir por las otras cosas. Pero que es algo que quieren hacer. Y si lo pueden poner en Path of Exile 1 a la vez con Path of Exile 2, sería fantástico.
We'll leave the currency exchange there.
Eso es lo que dicen.
Thanks for the extra insight on that. Did you have to resist temptation to go like full candle graphs and all that stuff?
I'm sure at some point the this will start to happen. We'll have like community like websites of like all the technical indicators and like all that sort of stuff.
Mad Money YouTube channel. Yeah.
It is worth noting also on the currency exchange, I will be posting a video on Monday just for anyone who's unclear, or Monday or Tuesday, New Zealand, for anyone who's unclear on how it works. It's a little bit of a like currency market for dummies kind of thing. It's just goes
over the basics. Un tutorial de cómo funciona eso, lo vamos a poner el lunes o el martes de Nueva Zelanda.
Feedback on UX if they see anything that wants to change.
Y va a estar esperando también un poquito de feedback en el UX en caso que haya algo que no se entienda.
It's very easy for someone to get very scared looking at it and go, I don't quite know what to do. But it is pretty straightforward. You just...
Y sé que al principio va a parecer un poquito raro como...
easy to fare yourself out of buying or selling stuff.
Que va a parecer como un poquito abrumador, pero que va a ser muy rápido entender qué es lo que tienes que hacer.
Como Path of Exile.
Abres el árbol, no sabes qué mierda es esto, pero rápidamente entiendes cómo funciona. No, rápidamente me refiero como unos 10 años.
Understanding when they're going into it and... We'll see how it goes.
Mate, I'm definitely signing up for your trading tips newsletter. Can't wait.
My trading tips currently is like spam everyone and get really angry. So hopefully it's no longer that afterwards.
That's all of our strategy currently.
Mark dice que sus tips de tradeo actualmente son spamear a todos y molestarse mucho.
How did this very cozy concept for the settlers come about of this town building thing?
Well, I know what you pitched me on first was Pal World League.
Pal World League.
Yeah.
That was the first pitch I got.
I remember your initial response, I think, was, hold on, that could mean many things. Does that mean we have guns? And I was like, well, maybe.
Like Pokemon things.
You know.
Yeah, so it kind of like it moved around a little bit from the initial pitch. I know, like, because I mean,
Dice que ¿dónde salió la idea de esta liga?
It had like way more stages of different products and all sorts of stuff going on. Like it was pretty crazy, and so it kind of got put into a more sort of like PoE applicable like way. But that was the initial one at least. But I don't know if you've got a
it was coming from again the philosophy of wanting to solve problems. So I wrote down all the problems, and I was like, how can we solve all these problems? And it was like, well, if you had an NPC for each, and then it's like an NPC, well, that would mean a town for each, and then you want to make some game mechanic out of it, so you have some level of automation and stuff like that.
De literalmente agarrar un problema en Path of Exile y tratar de resolverlo. Y dijeron, tenemos este problema, que tal si hacemos un NPC, tenemos un montón de NPC, porque no hacemos un pueblo, ya tenemos un pueblo porque no hacemos una zona, y así.
But yeah, and then obviously how the rest of it came about, the coziness and using Kalgur and all of that stuff, ultimately just comes from the fact that it's like, well, one thing that takes a long time in development, like a very, very long time, is art. Right? It takes a long time. You got your concept, you got research, you got, all the way through to the actual modeling.
Dice que el tema de los Kalgur y todo esto.
It is a long process. So all of a sudden when you can be like, well, we've got all this art from this other game here.
Andy.
Yeah. So we actually thought it would be pretty cool, basically.
Dijeron que, o sea, lo que más toma tiempo desarrollar es el arte. Puedes hacer muchas cosas. Entonces tenemos todo este arte de este otro juego y de todo este concepto. Así que, ¿por qué no lo tomamos?
Yeah, that's kind of ended up how that being. But the theme that we got there came after the initial concept of we want to make some kind of settlement town thing, and we're like, okay, what can we do with that? And then we realized, hey, like we've already got this sort of storyline we've got going on here in PoE2. We might as well, connect it up and kind of have like an interesting thing there.
It definitely feels like increasing the scope of the world a little bit because
yo le tenía razón. Hey.
This is a distant civilization 1,500 kilometers away. I saw on the map, and those are people who have not been involved in the storyline of PoE1. So this is a new expansion there. Worldwise.
I mean, they always sort of technically existed. Like there was lore written for that when we did the previous expansion with them, Expedition. But like in PoE2 we kind of expanded on that because we had that location and everything, and so we that just meant that we've got the stuff, and I think it adds a little bit to the flavor to have to do that sort of stuff.
But yeah, it is very, very rare for us to go to talk about or go outside of Rayclast ever.
Yeah, there's presumably a whole world out there, but we've not really heard too much about it.
Well, it's not just like here's a planet of water with this like tiny little island, right? Like
the Star Wars planets.
Oh no, it's me again. I know.
What we're saying is boat league is possible. It's not.
Oh my God, what the fuck's happening, dude? Lo que está diciendo ahorita es de que no es como que Rayclass es un sitio, está todo el planeta y está Reckless en un pedacito. No. Hay todo un mundo fuera de Reckless y estamos saliendo ahorita de Reckless ahorita.
No, aside from this little bit of water, there's just land. The rest of it,
Yeah, you've already dropped the ball on that one. There's a few boats already.
Damn it, there's lots of water.
Dice, como hay mucho agua, podemos hacer la liga de botes en algún momento.
This idea of this is very much like a meta progression league, right? Like, and that's not a new concept. The idea of like a league.
Ayelet predijo que iba a ser exactamente el sitio este de Path of Exile lógico y luego conectarlo.
Definitely the main flavor here.
Exactamente eso.
Is this something you specifically want to give players like a greater context for their things that they're doing? So they're doing their Atlas, but they're getting golden resources and progressing this whole other thing.
I mean, for sure, but I will mention that, like, I guess it wasn't dwelled on a lot in the video, but like the resource gathering thing, like those encounters are encounters that you're going to be encountering through the world. They have their own mechanics and stuff, which obviously Matt can talk more about. So like, that is definitely like content there as well. It's just to show, like, we kind of needed to show about all this sort of town stuff. But yeah, those encounters will hopefully be very enjoyable as well. And that's kind of like, I suppose you could call that the meat and potatoes in some sense of the league, because that's what you'll be doing. Every area you're going to find these things, and I have to do those encounters. So.
Yeah. So what's that content like in then?
Yeah. So you got one in every area. Well, aside from something like Tidal Island and some of that stuff. You got one in every area, so it's 1 to 2. And there are 5 different outcomes.
Hay 5 tipos.
Kind of 6, but we'll go over the 5 of
5 o 6 distintos resultados.
Minerals. So the first is Crimson Iron. Crimson Iron is like iron that's overrun with like corruption. So you have these 3, 2 to 5, as it goes up as you go through the game, of these kind of growth spawners, and they're spawning demons or monsters. And then as you kill each growth, the other growths heal, like surge, spawn more monsters, and they accelerate, so they get slightly harder over time. So it's just a full monster encounter. Upon completing it, you get the ore. You've got Orichalcum, which is like guarded by these also demons, or demons were worshipping it.
Que también son demonios que estaban,
and you notice it had like a shrine icon. So after you kill all the demons, you get the shrine buff, which is, without immediately it sounding underwhelming, the old you had the old like you got the Shock Nova and Firestorm shrines, except like done actual damage. So like all of a sudden you've got meteors and lightning storms raining down around you, and they are actually designed to kind of destroy monsters. So
esos shrines
just this spike of power where you can kind of just run through
and let them just rayos y meteoros y cosas. Están bien hechos y ahora están diseñados para que destruyan a los monstruos. No es como un rayito que no hace nada.
Like a little kind of like a tree thing. And clicking it, and all of a sudden heaps of blight-esque monsters kind of come out of the ground and try and attack it, and it's almost like the old Aurion missions from way back, where you just have to protect this tree from the blighted monsters. It's not very difficult. Like, none of these are pitched to be very, very difficult, but they are going up in difficulty in the order that I am explaining them. The fourth is Bismuth, which I suspect will be people's favorite. The way this works is it's guarded by magic and rare monsters.
La cuarta está
3 packs. I think one is rare, or maybe early game.
Es protegida por monstruos mágicos y raros, y dice que va a ser de las favoritas personas probablemente.
They have an extra elemental modifier on them, like the rare and magic mods. They just got an extra one that's elemental aligned.
Tienen algo elemental adicional.
There's some free 3 packs of monsters. No one's going to complain about that.
Son packs de monstruos adicionales.
Bismuth, it releases the elements into the rest of the area, which will apply elemental modifiers to all magic and rare packs in the area. League monsters have a lower chance of getting them, so it's not too out of control. And that does come with the difficulty, but it also comes with the increased item quantity and rarity that
it's a bit Wildwood,
the mods come with.
It?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Dice que es más o menos como Wildwood.
Spawn frequently enough, so I don't expect people to do the whole, run around the whole area killing nothing before clicking it.
Cuando mates a esos monstruos, van a aplicar sus modificadores a todos los monstruos del mapa, todos los monstruos mágicos y raros del mapa.
Finder's dream. Even though magic finding is nerfed, but whatever, that's a different thing. It is the current,
van a aplicar también más dificultad, pero también más quantity.
Because it's better now, because you don't have to wait.
Dice que es el sueño de un Magic Find, aunque el Magic Find fue nerfeado.
Well, yeah, sure. Whatever state it's in, or however you feel about it, it is the dream for that person, because obviously you can find I believe you can find 2 of them in an area, and all of a sudden you're doubling up on that. I will.
Dice que puedes conseguir hasta 2 en un área para que tengas el doble de recompensa, doble efecto de quantity y todo esto.
Throughout the level.
También el doble
obviously they don't spawn when all the monsters are dead, so you're not just like losing and getting killed by a random tornado. And then the 5th encounter is Verisium, which is the thing that the Calgarians love so much, and that very much is It's like the encounter from Crucible, where it's just like, you know, interact with this rock and it like builds up the amount of Verisium and like spawns all the monsters around it, and then you fight them and kill them, and you get the Verisium at the end, the monsters, you can see them kind of merging and upgrading over time, and so it's a little bit of a pick your own difficulty. Obviously it doesn't have the whole, I talk about Crucible, it doesn't have the whole weapon tree ruckus going on and having to put an item in there and all that. It's just here's your encounter.
No, pero si no lo hacemos todo el tiempo no es problemático.
There is one boss as well, so occasionally you find a kind of hollow in the ground.
Hay un boss en que sale de vez en cuando.
Very much in-game. Quite difficult, and he is guarding a lot of Verisium, and also again can drop a unique, and I'm pretty sure all those bosses drop a pretty substantial amount of gold as well.
So you've kind of like 5 micro league mechanics kind of just there.
Yeah. So tienes como 5 micro ligas
on top of all that stuff, but
encima de todo
it wasn't
lo demás.
really covered like that extensively in the video, so I guess that was something that people like. That's your kind of like main combat stuff that you're kind of doing. That you know, that's in
eso
the area.
Cubierto en el video, pero eso como que principalmente vas a estar haciendo constantemente.
Yeah, there's a couple of things like that. So yeah, there's kind of other things. So yeah, there's quite a lot. There's actually a lot going on with that. That more so than what was kind of explained.
Hay más de eso de lo que está explicado.
It seems like a classic fight monster in circle.
For sure.
Fight monster in circle.
Yeah, it's 1, 2, it's 2, 3, 5. So yeah, 4 encounters fight monsters in circle, and 1 is fight monsters in whole area.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Tienes 4 encuentros que son básicamente mata a los monstruos en el círculo y tienes uno de mata a un monstruo en otra parte.
It's still a fight monster in circle league.
Okay.
Yes, of course.
Sure. It all comes back to that.
It is expected, and again, you can. There's no real harm in like just doing that for as long as you want, accumulating as much gold as you want, and then if you want to engage with the town later.
Suena Path of Exile. Matar a un monstruo dentro de un círculo.
End of the day, the gold is going to be your primary restriction. So being able to just farm for ages and get a whole bunch of gold isn't going to like, and while not necessarily engaging with the town, is not going to set you back that far.
Yes, this is very much a take it at your own leisure.
100%, 100%, yes.
That touches on the next question, and the one that when I watched it, I was like, this is the thing people might be most concerned about, is the somewhat controversial area of game design. Timers, right? So
El tiempo.
we worried that this would give people ick because they just have that around timers.
I can see what you mean, and like that was honestly when I was talking to Mark about like, you know, what's the thing that's going to be the controversial thing about the league. That was certainly up there. One thing that we're wanting to make sure that's really clear though is that you can stack a lot of work like on like in your town that can be done in a queue without you having to come back. So it's not like you have to come back every freaking hour check and anything.
Dice
right?
que
Like,
quiere dejar claro algo. Tú puedes stackear muchísimo trabajo en tu pueblo.
Like,
o sea, no es como que tienes que llegar cada hora a hacerlo. Puedes stackear muchísimo trabajo y olvidarte de eso por un tiempo. Y puedes stackear un montón de mapas y volver cuando tengas todo el loot.
Doesn't mean it's so long.
Good.
Like there's these sweet spots in time that we've really aimed for, right? Anything too short, highly annoying.
Todo lo que sea muy corto es aburrido.
Anything too long feels like a mobile game.
Y todo lo que sea demasiado largo parece un juego de mobile.
Sweet spots for a lot of them where it's like for example, you have your queue of maps, but I think I will note, like I'm going to say some times, but it is like highly variable, and you have the agency based on how much gold you have, the skilled workers you have. You can get these things pretty damn quick.
Dice que voy a decir unos números, pero puedes bajar la duración. Depende de tus trabajadores, de cuánto hora le pongas y un montón de cosas.
So if you want faster turnaround on your rewards, you do have some agency on that. It'll just cost more gold to do so. And if you want to have like a slower turnaround, like and focus your gold somewhere else, that is entirely up to you if you want to do that. So it's got a lot of agency. However, like we have been experimenting with numbers like a lot. It has been discussed constantly. And for example, with the shipping, you had the port of Calgary. That's the one that has the longest distance, so the 1,500 kilometers. That does take the longest. And I currently believe it's like, you know, towards even 10 hours. But there are ones that are going to take less than 1 hour. Advantages, like a longer shipment will have yield better rewards and have higher risk and different rewards. Each port has different unique rewards, and a closer one, but it's not like such a differential that you're always going to do well. It's hard for me to predict exactly what players will think that is the best answer, but it shouldn't be the case that you're always doing the thing that takes, you feel like you have to do the thing that takes like 10 hours. So there's lots of quick things, lots of long things, and it's kind of up to you how you want to engage with that. And I think that's honestly what mostly differentiates a lot of this, aside with the fact it's also gated by gold, which requires you to actually play the game. It's not like it's just some AFK town, you know, at the end of the day you have to be playing in order to actually achieve this, killing monsters, looting loot. So,
en el nuevo pueblo y tú tienes la agencia por completo de hacerlo. Depende del oro, así que tienes que jugar el juego para poder acceder a esos sistemas. No es algo que simplemente vas a seleccionar y olvidarte y volver al rato y hacerlo como si fuese un juego FK.
It's going to be pretty bad if you're like, I'm level,
tú vas a tener que decidir si quieres algunas que sean rápidas, unas que sean intermedias, unas que tarden más tiempo.
You send your shipping and you're like, okay, I'm not going to get that back till I'm level 80.
The ritual problem.
That's just terrible, right? So, yes, there are very quick turnarounds as well for things like that, and then there are longer turnarounds when you're willing to spend that time to do so. And noting there are 3 ships, you could send one to a far port and then one to a close port, so you can get some ships turning around with high frequency and another turning around with a longer frequency. And the same with the mapping, it's entirely based on the difficulty of the maps, and again, how skilled your runners are. So if you want to have higher turnarounds as well, you can put in either easier maps, lower tier maps, or you can put in more difficult maps. Now, I did note in the live stream, the timer on the mining was before we had done any iteration, so I'm pretty sure it had some real absurd amount of time to mine that ore. That was just a straight mistake. It does not take that long. It is much quicker.
It's also worth mentioning with the stuff is that, like as I was saying with the queues, like, okay, you can just put as many, like when you find resources and there's that sort of mining queue, it's not like you have to like manually reassign your things every time. Like they just move on to the next task.
Yeah.
So effectively what that means is that, you're not having to come back every, like, and refresh them. You just play, and then the only stuff you have to come back, anything where you'd have to come back and reset them, like for example with the map, the queue is long enough that you can just like jam a bunch of stuff in there, and then like what I don't want is you to feel like you have to like wake up in the middle of the night and like freaking put more stuff in there and then come back. That's what I want to avoid. Like it should be that you're still coming back at the normal time that you would play, like that is our design intent. And so if that's not, like we need to make sure that we're balancing it correctly so that that's the case, that you don't feel pressured to like log in at some time you wouldn't normally do it.
Yeah, this sort of thing can be fun because it's like you get to come back to rewards and progress, and everybody loves progress and progression, right?
For sure.
We're addicts for that stuff. That's why we play this genre. But I was definitely concerned about that idea that would have
Recuerden eso.
I feel like if I didn't get on in half an hour after I was planning on logging off, I wouldn't be able to reallocate my workers.
Right.
But you don't have, it just does that.
Yeah, it just doesn't.
Well, we're not making a mobile game here. I know that's the
and you can't
association.
pay to skip any of these timers.
Of course not. And I'm not going to also at one point. I know. Look, these things are always going to be divisive. They're not necessarily going to be globally loved. And part of it is just you're going to have to try it to understand. The concept of a timer is scary to start with. But I'm also, on the other hand, not going to sit here about complaining about the cold currency thing and then also implement something that, on the other hand, I'm going to have equal levels of frustration with myself as a player. Surprisingly, but you want
to play this after all.
Está hablando más o menos de cómo algunos conceptos parecen un poquito raros y abstractos, pero son cosas que tienes que probarlo para saber exactamente cómo funciona. Y todo el tema de los timers y del pueblo y esto no es un juego mobile. O sea, vas a tener que jugar para poder interactuar con el pueblo y todo esto. O sea, eso es todo balanceado alrededor de eso, de que tú estés jugando, de que tú estés haciendo cosas, estés progresando.
Compared to everyone, so I could expect, if things aren't right, if they're off, if something is taking too long or too short, or there's not enough agency, we're very quick to be flexible to that stuff and react to it if we have to. But yeah, it's interesting and it's new for damn sure. But I'd say I'm more definitely on the side of excited over worried.
Good.
But there's always a little bit of worry there. It comes with the job, and
I like that you guys are still trying new things. Whether they work out or not.
100%. A large part of what we always try and do is push the boundary, right? Like just doing the safe thing over and over and over again can make things feel quite stale. So we definitely want to take risks and see where they go and see how they evolve, and because ultimately I believe that makes the best game possible for sure.
Lo importante es salir de la zona de confort y tomar riesgos, porque creo que esa es la única forma de hacer el mejor juego posible.
Okay, so whether you're
un poquito la filosofía de los riesgos que están tomando con esta temporada.
The only things that can happen that disrupt it, which is obviously like if your map, if your ship gets commandeered, it can get commandeered offline or online, right? So it can stop it. It isn't something that happens like ultra frequently, and you can avoid it. You can get it to the point where commandeering will not occur, and the same with your Atlas runners being kidnapped. That can occur online or offline, but again, it is avoidable. it doesn't have to happen. Like if you can get good enough people and run slightly easier content, and all of a sudden there's no risk of your Atlas runners failing or anything like that.
Yeah. Speaking of risk, so how does this scale with like map tiers and map effect and stuff like that? So as you move up through maps, do you get more resources,
de evitar
more gold?
de que requisiten
map quantity. So
bote,
gold, so gold
tu barco,
scales with
y también hay forma de evitar de que capturen a tus Atlas runners.
In
Todo depende del tier que uses, la capacidad de tus trabajadores y todo eso.
Gold, obviously, there's no point in having it. If you can't trade it, then all of a sudden, items do not sell for gold, so it's not like you can trade items to bypass that. But everything, item map quantity scales gold. Yep, all the same. It's auto pickup, obviously.
El oro se autolutea.
With obviously the new enhanced item pickup radius. And the amount of ore also should scale with quantity, yes. Obviously, much like sulfite, I guess, from Delve.
La forma en como los materiales escalan es igual de como escala, por ejemplo, el sulfito de Delve. O sea, más quantity, más recompensas de la liga.
To upgrade the buildings and things like that in your town, and that sort of progress is mostly through that. So the resources are all for this shipping to get this risk-reward system to get currency and gear and stuff like that. And the multiple pages of currency thing, that looked a bit crazy. Is that for real? Like, how much work is getting 3 pages of chaos orbs and divines and stuff?
Well, that's that agency I'm talking about as well, where a long trip should yield a lot of loot. Now, we have made some changes since then where what we're doing is, instead of because we were scaling rewards on quite a quantitative axis, and we've moved a lot of that into more qualitative, so that like instead of getting so much more currency linearly, you're getting better currency instead of more, just so it's less of that
alts roll up into chaos and whatnot.
Yeah, if you save up, like you can just be like, I'm just going to play, get all the gold and acquire as many resources as I can, and send a shipment that's like maxed out in value, and then put the best possible ship workers on there, because you don't want to lose that shipment, I'll tell you that, and send it to the farthest thing. Like, you'll get back a ton of loot, but of course you have to. You're now getting 1 week of loot all in one go, you know what I mean? Like, you will get an
tú para conseguir esas recompensas que viste ahí tienes que llenar un barco con muchas cosas y poner muy buenos trabajadores, porque no quieres perder ese barco, y te va a ser como poner una semana de trabajo en un solo barco. Una semana es un largo tiempo, en una semana se saca más de lo que sale ahí, pero we'll see.
I saw a question in chat as well. The wages, like, how does that work with the... when's that getting paid? Like, do you get overdrafted account fees? Like, what are we dealing with here?
So you
¿Cómo
have
es
to
los pagos a los trabajadores?
So you've got your personal gold, and then there's a treasury, and you want to put the gold in the treasury, and the wages only take from the treasury. And the reason for that is so that you're not like just randomly losing your gold. That you're like, okay, I'm going to get to 60,000 so I can buy these items. You know, all of a sudden it's just like draining it, and you like can't figure out. So your wages are paid from the treasury.
Tienes como que un tesoro en el pueblo. Tú pones tu plata ahí, o parte de tu plata ahí. De ahí es donde salen los pagos a tus trabajadores. No se saca directamente de tu inventario, porque si no es como que estoy poniendo plata de la nada, no sé cómo. Pagos, no, son pagos, no es como Warframe, no son esclavos.
Not in Rayclast, no.
No worker protection in Rayclast.
All of a sudden you might find you're collaborating with those pirates and with those bandits, and like, you know, you're arranging them to come in and kidnap people more often, and you know, you had that abandon option we saw because those workers were
nice.
No, they don't. It's all very much
Dice, aquí no hay reglas laborales, nada por el estilo en
Rayclast. Goal, I guess, on the same team, but they just want their money. That's fine.
Yes, the children yearn for the mines.
Pues la siguiente liga, ¿quieres ser tu propio jefe?
I cracked up when I saw the map running teams auto simulating map thing.
Yeah.
So do they actually simulate running the map? Do they like actually run the map for you and get the things out of it you would get out of it?
We've tried very hard to make it feel like the case. However, of course, like, you know, you don't simulate actually every single monster dying. It's too much expensive, right?
Extrapolated
but you effectively take here's what you'd have, and then you have, you know, I mean, here's the question: do you trust the workers to pick up the right items? Because like, what if it's like you like get back your items and you're like, damn it, I know you left a mage blood on the ground. I just know you did. But yeah, anyway, you're not going to think about that, obviously. I mean, you can if you want, but yes,
ten en cuenta que los trabajadores son como NPCs, o sea, tú confías en que ellos van a recoger los items correctos. ¿Cómo sabes que no dejaron un mage lo tiraron al piso?
Mage blood. If you put that base type in, you the mage blood card, you will get that card out. That is the way to get that. Of course, generally people like running that themselves. So,
and you're telling me that like if it's a Hydra map, they'll bring a Hydra fragment back for you.
Yep, if you put in a Hydra map and they clear it successfully. It's worth noting they have a percentage amount of clear. And you can get that as high as you possibly can, but sometimes they get through like 50% of it and die because you put the map in as too hard.
Yeah,
you'll get 50%
are they burning
of the
6 portals halfway through a Hydra map?
Yeah. Some of the, if you're not sending
ya vi lo que me mandaste, ahorita lo vemos. Ahorita lo vemos, Johnny.
There's different quality.
Está brutal.
Map runners just as
terminamos esto, vamos a ver todo eso, a ver el trailer una vez más, a ver las patch notes, a ver qué pusieron en la página.
I've tried mining the monsters and I failed
on the first pack.
But yeah, they'll bring that back. You chuck in a map with 5 delirium orbs, they'll probably all die, but if they don't, they'll bring you back some splinters and some delirium rewards.
So what's like the most sketch, like juiced up map that they can run here if you get the best of the best?
I mean, the same as the player, right? A fully A-prop corrupted T17 with, you know, whatever else is bloody on it. I mean,
tú puedes agarrar y tienes muy buenos trabajadores, mandarlos a hacer un tier 17 corrupto con un montón de cosas.
You can put it in and it can be like they have a 1% chance of 1% of the map will be cleared.
Good luck, guys.
And you put it in and you see the timer count down like 2 seconds and then they fail and you're like, oh, they just died.
Portals gone in 2 seconds.
They just died to the first monster.
Yeah, that's almost as bad as me.
So yeah, you don't want to do that.
Nice.
I mean, you technically can. You can just send them to die.
En
that case, they don't actually permanently die.
Sí, dijeron que cualquier cosa que puedas hacer tú lo pueden hacer ellos.
There is a sync on that, so you are constantly trying to find more, but it doesn't happen that often. And again, it is mostly avoidable by playing a little bit more safe instead of just sending them to their demise all the time.
This whole thing blows my mind. I just love the idea that we can just have like a bunch of plebs now to farm our fragments for it, so we can focus on bossing, like kings, while they do the peasant work in fields. Crazy. How did you like resist the temptation to not go super hard on this and like let us gear them and make parties and change their loot filters?
Well, you know, like early on, there were
¿Cómo se resistieron de dejarnos equiparlos?
That we were talking about,
like, hacer parties, loot filters y demás.
We were going like full mercenary system with all sorts of stuff for a while, but it was too much and it was too complicated. So
intentaron por un momento hacer un sistema de mercenarios por completo. O sea, hacer que tú puedas equipar a tus mercenarios, ponerles de todo.
Very early in the league.
You know, this massive expansion? This is actually the downscoped version.
¿Saben? Esta expansión, bueno, esta versión gigante, esta es la versión chiquita de lo que estábamos pensando hacer.
It's like you can send your mercenaries either on the ships or to the maps, and you can gear them up, and you can give them skills, and they have specializations. It's like
it was just too much, though. Like it was too much management, too much, like, you know, not good.
So so much going on.
Different league's problem now.
But yeah, that does kind of sound like another league that I want, though. I'm not gonna lie.
Eso suena como otra liga que quiero, no te voy a mentir. Okay, true.
Exile team manager, kind of like a sports manager game.
Yeah. Exile team.
Yeah. Awesome. Maybe for the future.
Maybe.
All right. So yeah, that features list, like that video just kept going. Like you guys also showed runesmithing, which is like a new take on bench crafting, but as enchantments. These rune words, are they all known recipes, or is there some like discovery process there?
So you start with a few available. So there are different runes, different names. There's like a sun rune, life rune, power rune. There's all these different names. And you start, I believe, you start with all the ones that require only sun runes, and then once you get a life rune, you can take it to Danig, and he's like, oh, now I can learn all of the things that require life rune.
Okay. And then hay distintas runas. Tú empiezas con todo lo que te dan las runas básicas, la sun rune, y cuando te consigas una runa de las otras, se la das a Danig, y Danig empieza a aprender esas cosas.
Work your way up to the very most powerful ones, and you get things like what you saw there.
Oh, aquí le medía de los gatitos,
which you can put on
del skill.
one-hand or two-hand axe. What we've done is with a lot of the basic outcomes, you can apply that to any weapon, but with a lot of the very specialized ones, you can only apply it to one type of class. So the idea there isn't that like every build is just now doing the Doomfletch Prism on any weapon, the one that we saw on the live stream. It's like, no, that specifically goes on two-handed maces. And then I think the Fire Mjolnir one that was there goes on, I think it's one-handed axes. And, you know, each thing goes
algunos modificadores de los ítems únicos solamente van en un tipo de arma. Hay unos que van en todas partes, pero hay unos que van nada más ahí. Por ejemplo, lo del Zoom Prism va nada más en los mazos. La de el Mjolnir de fuego va en hachas.
Yeah, and they get pretty powerful as far as like, I think there's one that is like 100 you can 100% reduce duration of like soul gain prevention for socketed gems on daggers, and like there's
100% reducción de soul gain retention en daggers. O sea, se carga siempre
I think there's like a rotating shrine buff one, so it's like every 8 seconds you're getting a new shrine buff on you, and not a lesser shrine, by the way, and sometimes including divine shrine as well. So you can just be like, I'm just going to sit here until I'm immortal, and then I'll do the boss.
17 mapping strategy.
But those all require the highest tier rune, which we expect to be very, very expensive.
So are these something that you can trade, the runes, between players?
Yeah, 100%.
¿Puedes traer las runas? Sí. Ok, perfecto. Las runas es la nueva currency. Bueno, hay muchas nuevas
primarily all come from shipping, which you can do pretty early in the game.
Al principio todas vienen de los barcos que pueden hacer al principio del juego.
Like additional bonus from shipping, where it's like if you trade to the Kalgurans, they'll send you that back, and the more you send them, the more runes they'll send you, because they're like, thanks for doing business with us.
Yeah, do you know what they're sending you back when you send them a shipment, or is it kind of just like...
No, we've intentionally been quite vague with that, just so people can figure it out. Now, it is... There's some determinism and then some that's just influenced.
No sabes exactamente lo que vas a recibir. Hay algo de determinismo, pero tienes que como ir aprendiendo qué es lo que te va a dar.
And experiment and make up their mind as to what they think is the best combinations to send
certain
to different
locations,
ports.
certain resources are going
to
give certain rewards back that players can
una combinación de cosas que te va a dar ciertas cosas, pero hay también influencias y otras cosas ahí.
I think in the numbers there it's set 100. So at any given time, it's like they'll pay double for wheat. Or I'll pay, and then once you fill that order,
cool.
So after you've sent 10,000 wheat, they might be like, all right, now we're going to pay triple for the next 500 verisium you send us, and stuff like that. So you are changing your shipments to different ports based on those bonuses. And then,
hay bonus que están en distintos puertos, entonces tú quieres como que constantemente cambiar lo que tienes para enviarlos a distintos lugares según el bonus que tengas.
You then send a dust, so if you send some amount of dust, it'll just double your shipment value. And so that one, so you know, it's almost like a meta reward mechanic in that regard.
And that's from grinding up your gear in the gear grinder thing. That's from
las notas de parche que ya están. Vamos a terminar de ver esto y ahorita vemos el resto.
You get a lot more dust for
Don't worry.
So just to add some value to some 1 Chaos T0 uniques, disenchant them because they will give you the most. They will give you the most.
So
dust.
Rarity is the key there. So
generally it's like better items give you more. So 6 mods, higher 10 modifiers, and then rarity higher.
You guys like adding sneaky new item sinks, don't you? Like that, yeah. Trying to get those 1C items to 2C.
For sure. I mean, it turns garbage items into good items is the idea, or into more dust. Tickets at good items. Well, but the point being, the dust is the ticket at better items, you know? Yeah.
Gotcha. Awesome. So another thing, Recombination returns from Sentinel. It was mentioned that it's not going to be as strong as it was. It was obviously one of the strongest crafting mechanics we had outside of maybe Necropolis and that. In what ways is it weaker now?
¿Qué tan débiles son los recombinadores ahora en comparación a Sentinel?
Not that I can even specifically remember exactly how it all worked, but there was all this like chance to mutate stuff that was going on with it. That's all gone. It combines the items and that's what it does.
Ya no muta las cosas. Todo eso desapareció. Ahora solamente combina los items.
Randomly appear?
No, those are gone.
Chance que aparezcan cosas particulares ya no existen.
Merge 2 items together.
Solamente los
combina. The other thing
that
I like about doing it this way, as opposed to having it gated behind a currency item, is that you can actually engage with it earlier in the game. Now, I know that's going to be pretty unorthodox for most existing players, but it's still something you can choose to now engage with because the gold cost is based on the item level of the item.
Yo quería jugar tryhard esta liga, pero quiero experimentar todo esto.
And more expensive later. And so it just opens it up to more players instead of just being this thing that you're only ever going to use on the best of the best.
Esta fácilmente puede ser una liga que esté en el día 3 y todavía está en la campaña.
That you can use it early.
Por estar viendo todo.
Or even like early maps, you know? It's not going to feel super punishing and like you can do things like that. If you want to, of course.
Well, it's a good mechanic for that, but something that wasn't really accessible.
Yes, correct. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, and I know Sentinel was added. They don't drop recombinators now because it's done through this mean. So
no dropean recombinadores, los sentinelas.
That you can randomly find in extra in maps to get more loot.
Te los dan.
More juicing, yep.
Lo tienes otra mecánica y los sentinelas simplemente aparecen y te dan más loot y ya está.
Making the campaign more interesting just with these random little encounters. You've got more stuff just appearing in maps as well. So Wildwood and Sentinel as well.
Yep, why not?
Yeah, why not, eh?
More juice.
Love it.
It's fun.
Wildwood
like the idea
Sentinel.
of just the random encounters. Like, they're not on the Atlas tree right now. That doesn't mean they never will be. But I like the fact that there's a handful of things that are just
Wildwood
randomly
todavía no está
you're doing your rotation
en esta cosa igual que Sentinel, pero puede que estén en el futuro.
And only in a positive element, right? It's not like it takes
especially
anything away.
for things like that are effectively just, this will give you more loot and currency and stuff. So like Wildwood and Sentinel, they're just about like giving you a big boost to magic find. So you might not necessarily want those to be something that players can have active all of the time, but rather as like a cool bonus that randomly appears to make your map spicy.
That is the other benefit, because it is random and not something that you can just have guaranteed.
It's not what you're playing.
They can be stronger.
Yeah.
They can be more impactful as a result. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Otherwise, they have to match the exact power of every other league on thing you can invest onto the Atlas tree.
Cool. So there was the mention of those like 3 bosses that can disrupt your shipping,
Sentinel y el Wildwood, como son aleatorias, pueden ser muy fuertes porque son aleatorias. Si no, tenemos que ponerlos en el árbol y equipararse con el poder del resto de las ligas. Así que es lo que no vamos a hacer por ahora.
It's always a boss fight.
Yeah.
Your Atlas runners will always be taken by
Más reduce que no se va a estar el jueguito 24/7. No.
Shipment will always be commandeered by the Admiral, whatever his name is, I forgot. Internal name by Pirate Boss. They get named and I don't remember them all the time. And then the one you find in the world is always the same one as well. And then the you pretty much just go, it'll notify you, and then you go back to the town, to King's March, and the NPC will just be like, here's a portal, go there, kill this person, or don't. If you don't want to. Like, if you feel like you're going to fail, you shouldn't go and do it, right? And you can bring your party members, but you can only enter it once. Like, once you die, you cannot re-enter. So,
cuando se roban tu barco o algo así, puedes ir y pelear con el boss, o no hacerlo y dejar que se pudren y ya está.
And reflecting on some of the changes that happened in it. First, the overall endgame overhaul, such as the removal of sextants and the massive scarab rework. How do you just feel about that overall, both of you first? How that went, the endgame overhaul?
I do think overall good, but it's very easy for that to get, looked at from a perspective of a few things that are bad and then looking at it badly. Like, there are certainly some things that were imperfect, and we are making some measures to change that. But I do think overall the shake-up was pretty healthy. And when I talk about the bad things, I'm talking like the T17 maps being too hard, right? Yep. And that kind of, it overshadows a lot of what's good about it, because there's these few things that aren't right. And then I'm also talking like, okay, we removed Wandering Path, great. And then we added Back to Basics, which is also gone now, by the way, just to clarify, which wasn't mentioned there.
Sure.
Like,
Back to Basics desapareció también. Rip Back to Basics.
Than Wandering Path, or equally unhealthy, depending. But both of them not good, not achieving the philosophy we want. So we didn't, because of that, and because Back to Basics became the meta, it ended up like not even evolving that much. And so I'm hoping with this now set of changes, but all of that ultimately comes about with, because what's going to happen is when you are releasing content on this scale, and I am certainly a risk taker, I like to push the boundaries and all that, you are going to have these things happen. It is borderline impossible for us to test
las barreras de lo que conocemos constantemente, de vez en cuando vamos a cometer errores y van a haber cosas que simplemente van a ir en contra de nuestra filosofía, pero no lo sabemos hasta que lo saquemos. Por eso es que Wandering Path, Back to Basics, ese tipo de cosas desaparecieron del juego, porque no están haciendo lo correcto, se volvieron el meta y todo el mundo estaba haciendo eso, no tiene mucho sentido. Así que mover un poco las cosas para que la gente tenga que descubrir un nuevo meta, a veces es como funciona mejor, y hemos de tomar riesgos. Por lo tanto, me parece que esta es la forma correcta de llegar a tener el mejor juego posible.
Is it okay? Like, is the difficulty versus reward correct for what the players can do here? This kind of thing, and it's something obviously that we should have been like thinking more about before, and like it's something that we're really making sure this time we'll try and do better. But it's tough. tough because like even thinking about what the most extreme case is can be really hard. Like so many things took us by surprise in terms of like particular combinations of things. Like there's so many just ways to combine stuff and like from so much content from the past as well that like you just
los 17 fueron muy desafiantes de hacer porque hay tantas cosas que se podían combinar que nos tomaron por sorpresa y es muy difícil saber hasta qué es el jugador normal que va a estar ahí, el desafío versus la recompensa, pero después hay un montón de casos extremos donde, sabes, todo se rompió y es muy difícil saber qué es lo correcto.
I'm like, what the? That sounds crazy. What are you talking about?
So, well, I guess we'll talk about some of the things that were happening that people weren't aware of. So there's there was a Reddit thread, and so I can't remember how far into the league, that was pretty much like, what the heck has happened to the prices of T0 uniques? Yep. And you had like Defiance of Destiny at like 4C. It was like actual craziness. And yeah, upon looking at this, and oh no, none of this was anyone abusing or exploiting anything.
Not a bug or anything, yeah.
In fact, I think, did we tell you the value of how many unique items were dropping in some of these things?
I told him.
I was going to ask you to guess, but we were getting over 100,000 unique items in some instances, and I'm not even talking in a map. In a single map. And
en un solo mapa, más de 1,000
a six-man group. I'm talking solo players who are able to achieve this. And this is where a lot of those things, so for example, the Shaper Touched rarity, there were just so many layers of multipliers that if used correctly altogether. But you ended up with less than 100 people on the entire realm acquiring over 99% of all T0 uniques. And so we have gone and looked at all that and been like, okay, with this, that is highly compromising the economy and the integrity of the economy.
Dice que había menos de 100 personas que tenían el 99% de los únicos de todo el juego.
Make sure that your average and above average player isn't like having the economy ruined as their experience, but we're just really, really controlling that like high top end. And I'm talking like most people would never have known this was happening. They would have just been like, where are all these uniques coming from?
It's not a bug, it's just the math of
correct. Y dice, eso no fue un bug, pues simplemente la matemática de cómo estaban funcionando, interactuando las cosas.
Mid-act nerfs, and yet there were certain cases, and that was really tough the last league.
Interesante.
Like we did do some changes to certain mechanics, which we wouldn't normally do because it was just so ridiculous. Like there was stuff going on there that just was not okay.
I saw a screenshot of like one of the monsters that would be part of this, and it was like, you know, it had a list of modifiers that was the entire screen, right?
Right. Yeah, we were talking yesterday about whether or not we need a way to collapse the display of the number of essences underneath something's life bar, and it's like, well, where are we at? Which, by the way, it's still there, so it's like, you know, a thing that you can still do.
Las esencias todavía están rotas, gente.
And I'm not talking like we're getting rid of all the uniques. Like that's what I'm saying. I'm asking you, is 150 all right? And you're like, that sounds excessive. And I'm like, well, it's like, you know, several hundred times less than what it was, but it's still top off screen, bottom off screen of unique items just everywhere, and that's just like a single monster. You get the whole res in the area, so we want it to be extreme, like, don't get me wrong, but it shouldn't be that the entire economy is ruined by 100 people who aren't, or a few people even, who aren't even abusing anything or exploiting anything or doing anything illegitimate. Like, and the problem is, that's where we got into that state where it was like, all right,
queremos que sea extremo, las cosas se pueden hacer, pero no está bien de que 100 personas que estén jugando sin abusar de ningún exploit ni de bug puedan simplemente arruinar la economía. Y que mates a un monstruo, tengas un spike de lag de 6 segundos mientras se generan tantos únicos que se salen de la pantalla de arriba y de abajo.
Further than that,
a normal player should not see any change.
Un jugador normal no va a ver ningún cambio en lo que estaba haciendo.
I loved how gloves off it's feeling with your ridiculous changes to the endgame here. Like, it feels like you've really
se hicieron muchos cambios, pero los cambios son para el top end, o sea, el tope, el 1% de jugadores que están haciendo esas locuras, están los cambios. Que el jugador normal ni siquiera va a notar que hay algún cambio. Como nosotros, que somos jugadores casuales.
Ultimately the one pushing most people to do this for PoE1, and the unfortunate reality is it comes with risks, and as a result, failures, of which are 100% on me, like, without question. And that's why, again, like straight after the patches, it's like full hands on deck trying to make sure everything is as good as possible. And then we get into a little bit of that difficulty of thinking some people want the game to stay as it is, regardless of the state, and a lot of people want it to keep changing. And we get into this kind of like, which side of this fence do we fall on? And we have to really evaluate each change and do it. But look, ideally, the changes wouldn't be necessary. But when you're changing this much, doing patches this massive, this quickly, some of it is inevitable. I would hate to, I personally, and you could convince me, you could, or not convince me, you could tell me I'm wrong about this, you might be able to convince me. I would prefer that we do everything possible with the time allocated, as opposed to like, play it safe, do something, a small patch and give it there, and yeah, sure, it's safe, yes, we'll go wrong, but at the end of the day, there's way less to do, way less fun, way less changes, less to learn and involve with, and it just feels like, I suspect at the end of the day it'll be way more boring,
en lugar de jugarlo
even though it
sencillo, aburrido y que todo se mantenga en el estado actual, que a algunas personas les gusta, pero nunca vamos a cambiar, nunca vamos a conseguir ese siguiente escalón si no intentamos empujar la barrera al siguiente nivel.
Just because it's safe, I want to always be making sure that we're doing everything to make things as fun and exciting and the best as possible for everyone, including myself when I play the game.
Well, these updates have felt way more energetic. It's I think it's refreshing, I think, for a lot of us who've been playing for 10 years at this point.
Right.
It's pretty cool stuff. So on the tier 17 maps, they were intended to be like a gateway to Uber bosses, but they ended up being harder and more restrictive than the actual content. And we had Uber boss viable builds, really struggling with that actual content. Okay. So how are you kind of changing things with that?
I mean, the ultimate numerical change to T17 monsters is that they have it's approximately 55% less life, so they have less than half the life they had before, and 30% less damage,
menos de la mitad de la vida de la que tenían antes.
And 55% menos. That was like actually not intended.
Yeah, an interesting story about that.
Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate that two different designers did the life change to T17 without realizing the other person had already done it.
That's so funny.
So that was kind of like an unintended.
El tema de los tier 17 es que dos diseñadores le subieron la vida sin saber que el otro le había subido la vida ya y terminó con el doble de vida que debería.
There was two people who made this change independent of each other.
We have counted that on the bosses to some degree, so they are, not just like an absolute joke now. But yeah, just the monsters themselves, which it did compound with back to basics and the mod scaling, like the thing. Once you have like 400% increased area of effect on the monsters, it's kind of like, okay, this is like getting a little, on the bosses I should say, it's like this is getting a little bit out of hand. Like, how can I dodge this mechanic that is larger than the arena? You could argue they're signing themselves up for it, but then it's like you want that for the rest of the map, which then means the bosses are pretty much like impossible.
Cuando usas back to basics, bufeas el boss también, las mecánicas que tienes un AOE del tamaño de la arena que es imposible de esquivar. Maybe podía esquivarlo.
And
I could do it.
The changes to T17s, implicitly, it should be more approachable to more players. Less you have to play like a subset of 10, 12 builds in order to achieve them. Like, it should be way more open. Obviously, with all the melee builds as well, that should be a hell of a lot more viable this time. So I would expect a lot more players to, be enjoying those as opposed to, because again, we're solving the item quantity thing where it's like we want to open up more builds and make you feel less like you have to play certain things. So then T17's being that hard resulted in the exact same thing. These are not intentional
things. Los T17 están un poco más suaves, por lo tanto más gente va a poder experimentarlo. El tema de la quantity hace que menos gente siente que tiene que jugar con algo en particular, lo cual abre más posibilidades de builds.
When we're just talking about like the top tier of maps, it's not okay to have it be so constrained there. So
cuando estamos hablando del tier más alto de mapas, no está bien de que sea tan constricto, de que haya tan pocas formas de hacerlo.
So the main design of the modifiers on these maps is these build bricking modifiers.
Somos un montón.
Are just basically not doable for certain builds or thereabouts. Why is this the method that you went with for these modifiers?
I personally just think it is important that you actually are investing in rolling your map and finding the maps that you can do, or choosing how you can overcome the modifiers. And I know that's probably not a popular opinion. I very much understand that a lot of people are just like, I can go, and that's all I want to do. But I think especially with the upper tier like that and the extra layer of rewards,
a él le gusta la idea de que tú roleas tus mapas y tengas que buscar la forma de solucionar el problema con el mapa para que un mod no te joda. Y si no, sabes, vender el mapa y hacer otro, por ejemplo.
And then you actually do commit to dealing with it. It again hopefully adds more ebbs and flows to the process as opposed to it
es algo que sabe que no es popular,
outgo and run,
pero él no le gusta la idea de que absolutamente todo sea outgo y listo, sino que con esta manera tienes que sea algo que es ligeramente distinto para
either one
para
that should be
tier más alto de
avoidable
mapas.
or not to the extent it was before. And again, investing into them, rolling them, like it's certainly not something I'd want to stray away from. I actually consider it a success when you have to re-roll your maps. Again, probably a controversial take, but I think it is a much better thing getting an actual... Like, it feels more like an actual game mechanic as opposed to like, well, at the point it's just alk and go, and alks are worth so little. Why you just drop them rare, and like, why are you even engaging with the currency on maps system?
Why have mods if the mods don't matter?
Do you take like some consideration to how many chaos, for example, you expect someone to put into a map to produce mods that are on average viable for their build that they're doing?
We do, yes. So I mean, not in the context of a build here, but like, for example, we were like, okay, if we want to make T17s able to be easier, like, should we reduce it back to 4 to 6 modifiers? But then you just, the argument, the reason why we never did that just this league is because, well, now it's even more chaos you have to invest to get 6 modifiers, because the right answer is probably to run 6 modifiers because it gives the best rewards. And so it's like, well, that's just going to massively increase the amount of chaos orbing someone has to do on those maps. So let's not do it that way. Let's find a different way to do it. So we're definitely considering how many you're having to. From a like hyper build specific, it's like, if I'm playing this exact specific build, how many chaos on average do I need to avoid it? No, not like hyper specific, but in terms of like broad mechanics, we do generally try and consider that.
Yeah, I imagine you'd be taking like a range of builds and saying, oh, on average, it's going to take about 10, 20 rerolls to produce a map you want to run on this character.
But my hope is that some people at least look at it and go, okay, if I just change this one thing, then I can still run it. You know, so it's not always just like...
Mark tiene la idea de que los mapas
I know this is probably the preferred strategy. In fact, I'll do it myself.
Sea algo así como que...
you just avoid anything
este
that's
mi
going
build, si
to
cambio esta cosita, puedo hacer el mapa. Pero la realidad es que la mayoría de personas no piensan así. Piensa en, ¿puedo hacerlo o no puedo hacerlo? Si no cambio el mapa, y si no cambio el mapa, no hago el mapa. Así es como funciona la mente de la mayoría de las personas. Y lo sé porque no solamente así funciona mi mente la mayor parte del tiempo, sino porque he visto cómo funciona la mente de la mayoría de las personas. Me interactúo con un montón de gente que juega así.
You want the mods to matter, and I get that. And these certainly do matter, but how do you feel
about it? Pocas veces me acuerdo de que, ya, puedo hacer este cambio y hacer At City, por ejemplo, At City. Tiene el reflect and shield. Casi nadie piensa en voy a cambiar mi build para hacer este en particular para después cambiarlo de vuelta, porque si tienes un build de una forma, porque esa es la forma más eficiente del build que tienes hasta el momento.
The problem you have with things that are implicitly adding direct rewards beyond
y generalmente no puedes cambiar que si una pieza del build, tienes que cambiar múltiples cosas del build.
You now feel like you have to roll for them. And you saw like this with the shaper.
Is a maze.
And with the shaper touch modifier earlier this league before it was changed, all of a sudden and now all of a sudden you're spending more currency on the maps than you were avoiding the builds, because now you are not only having to get a specific rewarding
si vienen aquí me ayudan un montón y se los agradezco del fondo del alma, y aparte les va a llegar una carta directita de Howard para que se volvieran magos. Si no les gusta eso, también les llega una Pokébola para elegir el Pokémon de su gusto y se vuelven unos Pokémon más.
Like, you know, sink currency into this. I would actually expect the amount of chaos you're sinking into these is less this league because we've removed those. But we have kept some, but like we've also then made them rarer, so you're like less likely. But then
removieron algunos,
which I know you could say is
algunos modificadores del mapa 17, por lo tanto esperan que gastes menos caos para rolearlos en esta liga.
You're no longer expecting to get it, and thus you are just like okay, getting it as a surprise, as opposed to when it's kind of within reach, you will just sink currency until it's there. But I actually do like the fact that, like, I honestly I liked the days back when you would roll for a lot of the maze and then you'd exalt the maps and stuff like that. That stuff was enjoyable. I found that quite enjoyable.
But it was kind of like the game is a bit different than how it
used
used to be.
For sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
él recuerda la época en la que tenías que rolear un mapa para que diga el Large Maze y meterles exalteds y demás. Dice que esa época le gustaba.
Reward mods can be
sí,
bad,
pero este juego es tan distinto.
But it's good to also have
tan distinto de esa época.
There's like a little bit of friction there, which is hard to get perfectly right. And then in the same
sense,
yeah,
I mean, llega,
some of them are
llega Don Gragas.
There are some other small balance changes around T17s, like those bloody Revenant packs are were out of control. All of a sudden the corpses exploding that you can't even see. Like we did all of this telegraphing improvements to Detonate Dead and then missed Revenants.
Good stuff, yeah.
So all of a sudden now you're just dead to this invisible corpse explosion. And there's a few other fine-tuned balance around some of the T17 stuff to make it feel less
Dios mío, man, lo que se ve en esta liga. Lo que es esta liga, Dios mío.
Pretty good. I'm not going to say it's perfect, but I'm hoping that it's going to feel a lot better.
Should tier 17s be one of the most profitable things to farm?
¿Los tier 17 deben ser las cosas más profit para farmear?
Think yes.
Yo creo que sí, dice Mark.
What is the argument for no?
I've just seen discussion
I don't mean from you, I just mean in general.
Yeah, like some people are concerned about whether that's the thing that should be happening or not.
Well, should T16s before that? And you could argue, well, okay, T17s you have to trade for. And that's the real difference, is that if you want to run them permanently, you have to trade for them. But generally the economy sorts itself out there to some degree. It's just that it adds that extra layer of annoyance. Yeah. But then also if T17s were self-sustaining, then it was kind of like what differentiates them from 16s at that point. It's just back to what you were doing with 16s, except they're now purple with harder modifiers. And you could argue that's better or worse, except I really like the idea of that, when you are just generally playing and not engaging with, the trade to that level, you're doing 16s with the occasional popping into 17s here and there. I do think that is generally better. But I can see why
Mark
it can be annoying for someone who's like, I have to trade for these because I don't want to run anything but them.
Y la razón por qué es el tier más alto. La única diferencia con los tier 16 es que los tier 17 tienes que tradearlos porque no puedes sostenerlos como los tier 16, pero si dejáramos que sostenieras, sería lo mismo que los tier 16, solo que uno es púrpura. Así que
you're not expected to necessarily, like if you're just playing, without trade, to be able to just run it again and again for T17 specifically, and that's kind of also comes down to that same thing with the mods.
Esas figurillas atrás se ven brutales, man.
About rerolling T17s is because of the fact that you don't necessarily have, they're not just growing on trees. That's why you've got a bit of a different philosophy there with the mods that they have on as well.
I know this stuff is pretty it's going to be pretty polarizing between people as to what's right there, but it is very important to us that the ebbs and flows remain and you don't just end up with this flat boring grind at the very top end like that. It should be evoking difficulty and it shouldn't just feel completely just it gets further away from a game and more towards just a kind of AFKable / and I don't mean actually AFKable, but something where you're not really investing much emotion into and thought into, and it doesn't feel like you're playing at that point. It just feels like you're just going along with it. I think it's very important to have the different spikes and things come and go and to have friction.
Para Mark es importante que tengas algo de fricción o unos spikes de dificultad, porque si no, vas a hacer lo mismo, es como que no estás jugando, simplemente estás repitiendo una y otra vez. Y está bien tener algo de eso, pero no todo puede ser así.
It feels like now it's mostly people just kind of spamming Katarina with maybe some consideration to getting some div card stacks or something like that, but you're not really doing as much of the
Betrayal. ¿Está hablando de Betrayal?
Now, I think.
Betrayal is in a very bad state, for
Betrayal
sure.
Está en un muy mal estado.
With it. It was on the list of 325's thing. I know, despite the fact we have so much, there was more. We didn't get around to doing it. It's currently slated for 326.
No nos dio tiempo.
I'm very much hoping we can do it then.
326 es el plan para cambiarla.
The main thing I want to divorce is, so I actually just want there to be, there is one safe house and that and so all four connect to one thing. Sorry, how do I explain this? It's effectively Katarina isn't tied to the safe house. You can do your safe house and that will give you a ticket to Katarina. And so you just have one safe house that has the whole board on it and you earn intelligence for it, and the people still have their reward association, and then doing that gives you a itemized version of Katarina you can run separately.
Dice que el plan que tiene para Betrayal es bastante bueno.
Two Katarinas.
En lugar de tener 4 safe house, es tener una sola y que todo vaya a esa sola safe house. Una vez que la completas, te da como el ticket de Katarina y tú puedes tradearlo o usarlo después. Pero es como algo aparte. No tienes que hacer el board Katarina, resetearlo, hacerlo de nuevo. Sino como que es, entonces la casa tanto como puedas y después te guardas todo eso. Parecido como Alba, exacto. Solo que en Alba, todas tus recompensas están en Alba. Aquí tienes tus recompensas en la safe house y aparte tienes a Katarina.
And so I want to divorce those two things such that one doesn't destroy the other. Because it hasn't been right the whole time. So, and I think that will just be a much better if we do that. And then Katarina is just there as a thing you can do. You do the boss fight and you can trade for it. You can buy the tickets to it if you want. Or, and then you can do all the board interaction, separately. You'll still have I want to min-max my safe house running to get tickets to Katarina, but what we can do is have a correlation of the chance of getting it or the number of the tickets you get to Katarina correlate to the state of the board.
Múltiples tickets para Katarina, tal vez.
At least I don't ever want it to be like I'm not going to fight Katarina because I don't want to reset the board. I don't think those two frictions should ever occur. It hasn't been right, honestly, since we released it, to be honest.
All right.
So.
Let's let him cook, hey? Let's let him cook. So we should talk just a little bit about Necropolis
me gusta la idea de
I know you're pretty excited for the mechanic. I was too. I love a good, thick crafting league. And it certainly ended up very powerful, but ultimately the crafting mechanic, not that popular, I think, due to the friction of engaging with it, the corpses, managing all of that. But how do you feel about Necropolis in hindsight?
Sí, ¿cómo te sientes con Necropolis?
Yeah, definitely that part is, well, we kind of knew going in that it was more on the complicated side, for sure.
Sabían que estaban como en el lado complicado.
Some things just kind of, it's not necessarily a problem for something to be a little bit more complicated like that, but it probably went a little bit too far. That being said, it was pretty damn powerful, especially after our changes we made very early into the league.
Era como demasiado
in terms
fuerte.
Of getting like full T1 modded
Después
items.
De los cambios que hicimos muy arriba en la liga.
But yeah, that being said, understood it was a bit too computer sciencey, I like to call it, in terms of like lots of figuring out what to do and kind of uncertainty to the point where it overwhelmed a lot of people. And that's where you see, even recombinating and runesmithing coming back way more simple, straightforward. Some things are just very clean cut. Some things are a little bit more complicated, and different users appeal to both. Would I have changed it now knowing that? I mean, I would have had the balance initially go out correct at the start, but I would say there's still a place for things like for it.
The update was certainly very solid for it, making it a lot better.
Simplified a bunch of stuff down with it as well. I'd probably have gone a bit further with the simplification if I'd had to redo it with some of it.
Si Jonathan tuviese que rehacerla, la simplificaría mucho más.
Crazy things are a little bit,
For me, though, it wasn't about so much how much complicated it was, and
no, para el micromanejo.
About the just getting so many corpses. Trading for so many corpses.
Right?
Que el problema de ZiggyD no era lo complicado, sino el montón de cuerpos.
Yes, fewer, more impactful ones would have been a lot better. Yeah, you ended up getting a lot.
Literalmente día uno dijo,
hubiese sido mejor,
mucho menos cuerpos que sean más impactantes.
Straight up.
Cortar por 10 los cuerpos, multiplicar por 10 todo lo que da. En lugar de darte más 50 al tier de vida, te da más 500 al tier de vida.
Everyone saw that as an Atlas tree tax.
Un cuerpo en lugar de 10.
Yeah.
Yep, it was. You could have argued making them way weaker would have mitigated that. Whatever.
Why?
The original intention of it was like, okay, we want these keystones because it allows people to change behavior. And I think if we are to see that again, we would have that. We'd have introduce ways for people to change the behavior, but not invest into the increases and more corpses and all of that, because it felt mandatory. And it often will when you have the league in every single area. And so, yeah, that was a pretty big contributor towards this problem.
It felt like the opposite of what we were talking about with Gold, where Gold allows you to turn like user experience friction into gameplay friction. It was the opposite, where it was all user experience friction, because it was about trading with a ton of non-responding people for corpses.
Well,
dice que uno de los problemas de la mecánica, a diferencia de esta nueva mecánica que está poniendo, es todo, era todo UX. Tener que tradear cuerpos con personas que no responden.
I remember Ziz messaged me at one point and it's just like, oh my god, the amount of quad tabs I need to hold all these corpses, and I'm just like feeling real sad about it. It's not like, that was the intention by any means. So yeah, I didn't quite hit the mark for sure.
Just lessons learned.
Lessons learned for sure. Yeah.
All right. Cool. The All Flames had a bit more mixed positive and negative. Like it was definitely a very cool added layer of map customization, but it was not optional, and that was definitely the concern we had going into it. And
no era opcional.
It also added just that extra layer of work that you have to do before you can start playing, which PoE has a fair bit of. And
for sure. And again, we again with the league being like, something you do have to generally engage with before doing areas. It's again that kind of X factor that makes a league different and makes it feel different. But at the end of the day, probably was a little bit too much annoyance to have to do this thing every single area. But it's certainly we try these things out here and there. Some people probably thoroughly enjoyed engaging with that stuff, of course. And I mean, end of the day, leagues are never going to really be for everyone. They're always going to have some amount of people who aren't really into it.
Un buen punto.
But look, we tried something new. We always do like to try something new.
Mar dijo, intentamos algo nuevo. Definitivamente era como demasiado todos los mapas. Estoy seguro que hay personas que lo disfrutaron, pero desgraciadamente las ligas no son para todos. A veces fallan.
We don't do it again.
Está bien, no lo hacemos de nuevo.
And this is a lesson learned every single league.
Y es una lección aprendida. Todas las ligas aprendemos algo nuevo.
We learn from, there are elements we don't repeat, and then we take often what we can do is take the stuff that is good, that is fun, and find a way to integrate it into the game later. And now the core game experience is overall better as a result of us learning from all the stuff.
Yeah. Keep the experiments going. Keep going wild with it. We're going to go rapid fire now so people can get their 30,000 patch notes, their record-setting patch notes very soon here. So we had finally the much-awaited massive melee changes. What was the big thing that was led to you guys pulling the trigger on this issue?
I mean,
melee stuff.
Ultimately, the community.
La comunidad fue lo que nos empujó.
What was the key change that you kind of needed, maybe to get figured out?
The one that I remember us walking through was there was kind of we made a document of okay, what are the things that a melee build currently mandatorily needs to know to do in order to be viable, and effectively we had all these multipliers, and if you didn't know to do them, then you just sucked.
It's bad. Yeah.
And so effectively we needed to do something about that to make it so that
lo principal
just que
teníamos es
path.
Que necesita
I think
un melee build para que sea viable. Tuvimos un montón de jugadores que no sabían esas cosas y simplemente el build apestaba. Entonces tuvimos que rearmar eso.
Maybe there's some way to make it so that you don't, the builds that use them aren't the same as melee builds or something. But in the end, it was just what, we'll go clean slate, and we'll try to make sure let's just get rid of any of these barriers. And I think that was probably the right choice.
I just want you to hit things with your weapon, or monsters or the ground with your weapon, and things die, and you're not having don't get me wrong. I want there to be secondary axes of skills that are often skill involved. You do have to use them. I don't just want it to be that you have 1 6-link and every single other gem slot is empty. It should be that there are these other axes. But I also want you to be able to choose whether or not
un arma, le pegues al monstruo y se muere, o le pegues al piso y la onda mata al monstruo. Y hasta debería ser así de simple. Obviamente después de ahí distintos axis en los que tienes que escalar o involucrar skills, etcétera, pero no debería ser tan complejo como era el melee actualmente.
Much weaker initially, and you have to invest into the passive tree and stuff like that to make it good enough. But it means that different characters will have different secondary specializations, and you'll find a lot of these, something like tinctures, something like retaliation skills, they're going to be quite polarizing. People are going to love them or hate them. And that's okay, that's good. And it means that you get these differences in builds.
Puede ser, se les rompe la cabeza, o tal vez sea como natural. A veces lo que es nuevo para nosotros también es nuevo para ellos y tenemos que absorberlo.
Vamos a ver. Unique item-driven mandatory things, right? I don't want uniques to suck, don't get me wrong. I just want it to be that it's in order to do X, Y, and Z, I must be using this, and now I'm considered viable by the game's standards,
like build checklist thing that we...
It's gone a little bit too far.
El tema de los únicos, de los poderes, de los únicos que puedes incluir,
to the forefront on the passive tree, because that is one way
place. Es algo que,
and of course, by having
y en el árbol de pasivas, es lo que queremos, porque previamente es como que necesitas tener esto y esto para siquiera ser considerado viable. En cambio, ahora si todo eso está en el árbol de pasivas, va a ser mucho más accesible.
We haven't buffed the life on every unique, we've buffed it on counts. That's it, right? So all uniques proportionally just got worse to rare items. quite intentionally, so that, you know, rare item, and it's not, you know, it's not just hiding behind all these things you got to learn and wiki and do all of that. So it should be that you can get further without having to have extreme specialized knowledge.
Dice, la idea es que puedas llegar mucho más lejos y tener un conocimiento especializado, sin tener que usar la wiki, por ejemplo.
That were like hard to figure out, way more to the foreground, so they're just more obvious, and so you can figure them out. And also just,
y que los únicos son ahora peores por el simple hecho de que los raros son mucho mejores que con la vida, por ejemplo. El único que tiene más vida ahora es Counts.
And combine this and this and this and this and this, and now things get hit and die. But that is still there, and that will allow you to go even further and even more efficiently, and thus get more items and more power, of course, right? We're not dumbing things down. The intention is just to make it that, like, if you aren't doing all of these things, you're not just absolute garbage, you know?
Well, playing devil's advocate a little bit, the new banners, is that kind of just melee totems again?
I mean, not in this... Okay,
they're not as powerful
implicitly. They are... It depends on what you want to call it. You can look at the totems from a perspective of, yes, the busy work side of things, of I'm having to do this thing every so often, sure. But it's also not like, if you don't use them, it's not like you're bad, right? You can get damage from so many places. Only one of the banners is giving damage. It's giving a lot less damage. In order to make banners really good, you have to spec into a lot of them onto the tree. They are still kind of good. I do expect a lot of melee characters still to be using them. And I do like the idea that there is...
Dice, si estás con,
skill involved as to thinking when should I use them.
They're not an always up thing like the totems were, which is the biggest issue with them.
Unless you
en el sentido de que los totems los pones para hacer algo y los banners los tienes que poner para hacer algo, son iguales. El tema es que tienes un solo banner que te da daño y te da menos daño que lo que te daban los totems antes. Y si quieres te dé mucho daño, tienes que poner todas estas cosas para los banners. Si tú estás usando tu mente y tu especialización exactamente para eso. Si no lo haces, puedes sacar daño de otras partes de otras maneras.
Monster to monster clearing, they're not.
Por lo tanto,
I feel you have a lot more agency
tienen
with
como
banners.
Que un componente de los totems, pero sin obligarte a usarlos como eran los totems antes.
Getting rid of, I mean, even like Berserk, we're getting rid of a lot of the extreme high power mandatory
aparte de que la forma en cómo lo explica es que está clarísimo lo que está diciendo.
Know about it, all of a sudden you're not, you know, considered viable. And the one other thing we've done there, I know we said rapid fire, but don't worry, it's part of the question.
People can wait.
We've made sure to take, we've got spreadsheets out the wazoo of like experience per hour testing. We've got like, you know, time testing. We've got like our one of the people probably see him takes ages, always on the ladder, freaking winning things here and there. He has been sitting there running, literally doing races, technically with every single class for the last 3 months, probably straight. Every single waking minute, he is playing a different character, writing down times to kill Brutus, time to kill this, time to get to this, time to do this, XP per hours everywhere, what variables make the most difference. And we've taken all of that data and gone and been like, all right, these are the outliers on the bottom, these are the outliers on the top. Let's like find out where the thing should sit. And generally, it's now meant to be, if you are a character with a melee character, and let's say you've got 70th percentile gear, and there's a caster next to you that has 70th percentile gear, if you can maintain, a melee character is generally meant to be stronger and more efficient at that point, of course, but it is easier to take damage and harder to maintain damage uptime as a result.
Estaba
so if you can
hablando
overcome
de
those
que
two axes, a melee character with equivalent
que gana todas las
gear
carreras, olvidé el nombre,
should be better than any other character.
lo tenían hace 3 meses corriendo todas las carreras posibles y tomando todos los puntos particulares con cada uno de los personajes de muchas maneras para saber cuáles son las mejores y peores formas y poder bufear y nerfear cosas según sea apropiado.
Making base matter again is one thing, but also it's again adding that very obvious way to keep getting upgrades throughout endgame.
Esa parte la escuché bien.
Like, honestly, given how long endgame takes and how much of an integral part of it is, like the amount of base types introduced there, like sure we had steel rings and two-tone boots, but they didn't really make a huge difference. So we're just adding more here. It is more clear. Like, if you were struggling in yellow maps, you have something you can try and get now to make that easier for yourself. If you're struggling in red maps, you have these obvious things that are like, this will be an upgrade for me. Let me actually try and do it. Obviously just on the defensive axis for now, so you can maybe focus a little bit more of your passives into damage, along with all the new defensive tools. But yes, primarily it is like, you know, a more obvious, here's a way that you can upgrade your character. And of course, for high-end players, it's a new thing to strive for, to push their character further than ever before. I wouldn't say this specific direct goal is like get rid of unique items. That is just a happy side effect of, you know, rare items mattering more once again.
All right. We'll wrap up pretty much there. We've got lots of new leagues coming back this time. Is there any other ones you're looking forward to? I know people have been asking about the Trial of the Ancients as well, whether that sort of stuff's coming back.
¿Toto va a volver en algún momento?
Trial of the Ancestors, probably not. Maybe for I don't know. You never know with these things. If you had asked me Sentinel, I would have said no.
Yeah.
And now it is. So you never know with these things, honestly. I'd say there's no current plans, but who knows? Things change every week around here.
Dice que no hay planes actualmente, pero si me hubiese preguntado la liga pasada si volvía a volver Sentinel, te hubiese dicho que no, y ahora volvió. Así que las cosas cambian aquí de semana a semana, así que es difícil saber.
You guys will be able to answer some of them there and read some of those later. But thanks so much, Jonathan.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
Le dieron duro, ¿no? 1 hora y media de Q&A.
It'll take a while.
Yeah.
We considered doing audiobook versions of them in the past, but I'm not going to be sitting there. I would have to be reading that.
Pick your favorite streamer. Remind them to drink lots of water.
Damn.
And enjoy, folks. But that's it for now. I'm ZiggyD. Thanks for watching, folks. See you later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Holy dude. Literalmente W. Based as fuck, man. Ok. Resumen rápido. Bueno, resumen no es tanto resumen, pero una de las cosas importantes que saco de este Q&A son, creo que 3 cosas en particular. Número 1, tomaron como que una forma muy, ¿cuál sería la palabra? Muy metódica para saber qué cambios hacer esta liga. Esa es una de las cosas. En lugar de decir, creemos que esto es así o creemos que esto es asado, decidieron decir, ok, vamos a investigar exactamente por qué estas personas están así, por qué estos están así, qué es lo que se están quejando específicamente, y fueron atacando esos problemas, y así fue como llegaron acá, lo cual me parece que es una forma muy, muy apropiada. Otra cosa importante es que hay muchas cosas en el pueblo nuevo. No es nada más el pueblito que vas a hacer creciendo y ya, y eventualmente te olvidas de eso, mandas los barquitos and shit. No. Hay mucho que hacer en el pueblo. Tienes mandar los barcos por loot, hacer que hagan tus mapas por loot, craftear con los recombinadores, básicamente. Nueva mesa de crafteo con mods particulares que tienes que hacer con con los sellos estos. Los materiales para mejorar tu pueblo. Los materiales y el oro para comprar a los tipos estos. El tradeo que tienes que hacer en el pueblo. Y estoy seguro que me habré olvidado algo. Entonces, esa es una de las cosas. Y con el tema del tradeo, aunque parecía relativamente simple, no era tan simple. Es... Gracias por el sustazo, papucho. Fist bump. Ahora, cuando digo que no es tan simple, no es que va a tener algún grado de complejidad, así como Path of Exile, tenemos que aprender un montón de cosas. No, sino que no es solamente el tradeo. O sea, tienes el tradeo y va a costarte una cantidad aparentemente ínfima de oro como para evitar de que sean tradeos infinitos por persona que a nivel 1 llegó y empezó a tradear. La idea es que tú tradees un poquito al principio, pero cuando estés en el endgame, tradeas sin ningún problema. Esa parte está bien. Ahora, el hub de trading va a tener un montón de cosas que te van diciendo, como que este ítem, por decirlo de alguna forma, está caliente, se está tradeando mucho, esto está subiendo de precio, esto tal. O sea, va a ser básicamente como un stock market, como una especie de Wall Street en la cosa de tradeo. Por lo tanto, eso el lunes o el martes va a estar sacando un video Mark explicando con más detalle como una especie de stock market para dummies en Path of Exile. ¿Cómo va a funcionar esto? Lo cual para mí es súper, súper importante. Cosa número 3. En el tema de la aldea, del pueblito esto y del trading y todo eso, todo es asíncrono. O sea, tú puedes hacer algo mientras eso se hace, tú puedes conectarte mientras eso se hace, todo ese montón de cosas, lo cual me parece que es fantástico. Y finalmente, los cambios que vienen al melee, a los ítems raros, algunos únicos, son bastante impactantes. ¿Por qué?
porque no es simplemente subimos esto y bajamos aquello como hacen en algunos casos. Es que hay cosas que cambiaron por completo, hay cosas que removieron, hay cosas que agregaron, hay cosas que bufearon, hay cosas que nerfearon, hay cosas que no tocaron, pero teniendo un panorama completamente distinto. Lo que antes era malo puede ser bueno ahora, y lo que antes era bueno puede ser medio o malo ahora. Así que exactamente lo que dice Killsonics, 1 millón de builds nuevas.